Jai Hind everyone. I am Aditya Bhattacharya from Team Pravada Motorsport, SAE GC, and I am here to introduce you to the basic working of automobiles. I would like to thank Digital Mania for providing us this platform, and I would also like to thank Bosch Automotives for providing us the resources for conducting this presentation. Now coming to our presentation, basically there are 6 departments of a vehicle. They are chassis, engine, transmission, brakes, steering and suspension. Now I would like to call my friend Manasi for beginning this presentation.
Jai Hind everyone, my name is Manas Veer and I am here to tell you about different systems that combines together to form a full-fledged vehicle. So starting from the skeletal system of a vehicle, the chassis, the frame. The frame provides supports to all the systems mounted on the body. The chassis is the combination of the frame and the systems mounted on the body such as engine, transmission, suspension, etc. So coming on the classification of chassis, we have three bases of categorization: on the basis of assembly, on the basis of frame and on the basis of engine fitting. Now we will discuss about each of them in detail. So starting the categorization on the basis of assembly, we have three categories named as conventional chassis, semi-integral chassis and integral chassis. So in the case of conventional chassis, the frame is in the form of ladder structure and all the systems are mounted over it. Due to its outstanding strength and load bearing capacity, it is used in heavy vehicles such as truck, bus, etc. In semi-integral chassis, all the systems are a part of chassis and engine is mounted separately on it. After that, we have integral chassis. It is basically a monocoque chassis in which mounting is provided for all the systems and components used in the vehicle. On the basis of frame, we have categorized chassis into four different categories named as ladder frame chassis, monocoque frame chassis, backbone frame chassis, and tubular space frame chassis. In case of ladder frame chassis, we have two side members supported by cross members. It has excellent load bearing capacity and strength, due to which it is used in heavy vehicles such as SUV, truck, buses, etc. It also lowers the center of mass of the whole vehicle. After that, monocoque frame chassis. In case of monocoque frame chassis, we have space to mount all the systems and other subsystems on the vehicle. In case of backbone frame chassis, we have a single strong tubular backbone having a rectangular cross section which connects the front and the rear axle. It is used in vehicles like Beetle. Now we have tubular space frame chassis. Tubular space frame chassis is made up of tubes having circular or squares cross section which are welded together. It is mainly used in racing and sports car. It is lighter in weight, but it is not suitable for passenger vehicles. Now coming to the types of monocoque chassis, we have aluminum monocoque chassis, Ulsab monocoque chassis and carbon fiber monocoque chassis. Since steel is heavier, so we have replaced steel with aluminum in this frame. Rest is same as monocoque chassis. In case of Ulsab monocoque chassis, we have replaced aluminum with modified steel, as aluminum is costlier and steel is heavier. Rest is same as monocoque chassis. After that, we have carbon fiber monocoque chassis. The carbon fiber provides better strength than steel and it has extraordinary strength to weight ratio. That's why we have replaced steel from carbon fiber and rest is same as monocoque chassis. Now on the basis of engine fitting, we have categorized chassis into 5 different categories named as fully forward control chassis, semi-forward control chassis, conventional control chassis, center engine chassis and rear engine chassis. In case of fully forward control chassis, the chassis is mounted inside the driver's compartment, which provides a better visibility to the driver. It can be seen in government buses. In case of semi-forward control chassis, half portion of engine is mounted inside the driver's cabin and rest half is mounted in front of driver cabin. In case of conventional control chassis, the engine is mounted in front of the driver's cabin. After that, in center engine chassis, the engine is mounted almost in the center of the chassis. It provides better traction to all of the wheels. And in case of rear engine chassis, the engine is fitted at the rear of the chassis.
So now coming to the main power of the vehicle, or the power producing source of the vehicle, which is the engine. The engine is basically the heart of the vehicle. So what is a heat engine? Heat engine is basically a machine which converts chemical energy to mechanical energy, electrical energy, or any other form of work. So what is the chemical energy? Chemical energy is basically the fuel needed to run the engine. And what is the mechanical energy? It is basically the power output needed to run the vehicle. So how does a heat engine work? Heat engine basically takes heat from the source, converts it to work, and then liberates the rest of the heat to the sink. This is how a heat engine basically works. Now coming to the types of heat engines, there are basically two major types of heat engines. One is external combustion engine and the second is internal combustion engine or IC engines. External combustion engines are those engines where the combustion of fuel is held outside the engine, and internal combustion engines are the engines where the combustion of fuel to produce heat is held inside the engine case. So now coming to the further classification of external engines, they can be classified into two types: steam engines and turbine engines. Steam engines are those engines which were used earlier in locomotives and other power producing sources, and turbine engines are those engines which are used in various power plants for producing electricity. Now coming to internal combustion engines, they can be categorized into four major parts: spark ignition engine or SI engine, compressed ignition engine or CI engine, gas turbine engines, and Wankel engines. We will discuss each one of them in detail. So now coming to our first type of IC engine, which is the spark ignition engine. So SI engines or spark ignition engines are basically petrol engines, and from the name spark ignition engine we can derive that the ignition of the fuel is basically being done with the help of a spark. So SI engines are basically those engines where the fuel and air mixture is ignited with the help of a spark. The spark is made with the help of a spark plug, and the air and fuel mixture is termed as charge, and it is made by a machine which is known as carburetor, and it is done in appropriate quantity and ratio. So now coming to the PV diagram of this SI engine. In this PV diagram, the heat addition and heat reduction both are taking place in constant volume process. So now coming to compressed ignition engine, which are also known as CI engines. So compressed ignition engines are basically diesel engines, and the combustion is held in this engine with the help of a fuel which is sprayed in hot compressed air. So air is being sucked in the engine cylinder, and it is compressed by the piston to a very high temperature and pressure. When fuel injector sprays the fuel automatically ignites and heat is generated. Coming into the PV diagram of the diesel cycle, we can see that the heat is added in constant pressure process, and the heat generated is a constant volume process. Now coming to gas turbine engines. Gas turbine engines are also termed as jet engines. They are basically used in modern day planes, jets, and helicopters. They are basically a series of blades and a combination of blades, rotating blades, and there is a turbine at the front and at the back. At the between, there is a combustion chamber which has a number of fuel nozzles, and they all are connected with a shaft. When a APU, also known as auxiliary power unit, rotates the axle or the shaft, air is sucked from the front and is compressed and is sent to the combustion chamber. A series of fuel nozzles spray the jet fuel into this compressed air, and the pressure of the and the pressure and the volume of the air compressed increases rapidly and it rushes to move out of the engine. This rotates the turbine, back turbine, and it rotates all the blades. This is how a jet engine works. And when air is sucked from and this movement of air produces the thrust or lift, which produces the main power producing source of a plane. So now spark ignition and compression ignition engines can be classified into two major types, two-stroke engines and four-stroke engine. So what is stroke? Stroke is basically the movement of piston from TDC to BDC or BDC to TDC. BDC to TDC, what is BDC and TDC? TDC is top dead center and BDC is bottom dead center. They are the points to which the piston can is limited to go. One cycle of revolution of an engine is the process in which includes suction, compression, combustion and exhaust. So two-stroke engines are basically those engines in which one cycle of revolution is completed, or one process is completed in two strokes of the piston. And four-stroke engines are those engines in which four strokes of the piston are used or are held for the four processes or one revolution to be completed. Coming to the types of engine based on shape. So engines are basically classified into various shapes according to their piston placement. The first is inline engine. Inline engine are the engine where the pistons are placed in a linear manner. They are found in every day-to-day cars and are very cheap to manufacture and maintain, as the piston heads are on the top and are easily accessible. The second is a V-type engine. V-type engine is shaped in the shape of a V, and these type of engine are used in various high-end cars and bikes. The third is the radial engine. In this, the placement of the piston is in a radial shape and radial manner. These are basically were used in old planes and nowadays used in small planes. The fourth is opposed cylinder engine. In this pistons of the cylinder of the engine faced in opposite direction, and they are used in various nowadays tanks and heavy armored vehicles. The fifth is the W type engine. The placement of the engine piston are in the shape of a W, and they are used in various supercars like Bugatti Chiron, Bugatti Veyron and Bentley Continental GT, etc. So now coming to the parts of an SI engine. So this is a diagram of an SI engine, also known as spark ignition engine and also termed as petrol engine. Some of the main parts of an SI engine are cylinder block, piston, cylinder, cooling jacket, camshaft, cam, spark plug, etc. So now coming to the working of an SI engine. When the inlet valve opens, air and fuel mixture from the carburetor is sucked inside the cylinder, and the piston moves downwards. When the inlet valve closes, the piston again moves from downwards towards up, and it compresses the air. When the air is fully compressed, the spark plug ignites and it creates an explosion in the mixture, and the piston is again pushed downwards, producing the power at the crankshaft, which is converted to the flywheel for the power output. When the combustion is done, the exhaust valve opens and the exhaust gases or flue gases are sucked out of the engine cylinder, and the piston is again moved from TDC to BDC for a fresh cycle. This is the cooling jacket in green, and a mixture of coolant and water is poured here and is circulated through the radiator for cooling purpose of the engine. Now coming to the working of a 4-stroke spark ignition engine or a petrol engine. So what is a 4-stroke engine? A stroke means the travel of the piston from TDC to BDC or BDC to TDC. TDC is top dead center and BDC is bottom dead center. They are the extent, maximum extent to which the piston can travel. So a 4-stroke engine is basically that engine in which a cycle of process is converted in 4 different strokes. Means the piston has to travel 4 times. So now coming to the parts of this SI engine, we can see that this is the piston, this is the intake manifold and this is the exhaust manifold. These are the intake and exhaust valves. This is the spark plug which is connected to the induction coil. This is the crank, this is the crankshaft, and this is the connecting rod which connects the piston to the crank. Now coming to the first stroke or the first process, the piston moves from TDC to BDC and the inlet valves open. In this process, suction is done, and this is also known as suction process, as air is sucked inside the cylinder. Air and fuel mixture is sucked inside the cylinder. In the second stroke or the compression stroke, the inlet valve closes, and as the piston reaches BDC, it moves towards the TDC, which compresses the air. In this compression of the air and fuel mixture, the pressure and temperature of this mixture increases rapidly. In the third stroke, we can see that the spark plugs ignites, and it ignites the whole mixture, which increases the pressure and temperature rapidly. This pushes the piston from TDC to BDC, and power is generated in this stroke. This stroke is also known as power stroke, and power is generated in this stroke only. Now as the power stroke is completed, the piston moves from BDC to TDC again, and the exhaust valve opens. In this process, the exhaust gases or the flue gases are pushed out of this engine cylinder through this exhaust manifold, and this process is known as the exhaust stroke. The exhaust manifold is basically a little thicker than the inlet manifold for the better exhaust of the flue gases. So these are basically the 4 strokes of an IC engine. Now coming to the additional accessories mounted on an engine, which helps in improving its efficiency and power output. They are turbochargers and superchargers. Turbochargers and superchargers basically work in providing compressed air into the engine cylinder, which result in better explosion and better ignition of the fuel air mixture. Now coming to the working of a turbocharger. Turbocharger is basically a combination of a compressor and turbine, which is connected to a single shaft. The exhaust gases from the engine is led to pass through the turbine, which rotates the turbine, and in turn the turbine rotates the shaft and rotates the compressor. The compressor compresses the inlet air, and it pushes the compressed air into the engine cylinder. This results in a better combustion. This is a supercharger. You may have seen this type of things in vehicle bonnets. This is how a supercharger looks, and a supercharger works by taking the power for the compressor to run directly from the flywheel. This decreases the efficiency of a vehicle little bit more than the turbocharger, but gives more power than a turbocharger. So this is how a supercharger and turbocharger works. Now coming to the cooling of an IC engine. Cooling of an IC engine is very important for its proper functioning, as it controls the viscosity of the engine oil and the whole engine. The first is air cooled engine. These are used in small capacity engines and they are the most basic type of cooling of an engine. There are small fins on the engine which increases the surface area of the engine, and air directly passes through it, cooling down the engine. The second is oil cooled engine. Here the engine oil is let to pass through a radiator which increases the surface area for the engine oil, and air cools it down by moving through it. The third is liquid cooled engine. They are basically used in various cars. They include a radiator and a mixture of coolant and water circulates through the engine cylinder blocks, and it moves into the radiator, which increases its surface area for cooling, and the air passing through the radiator cools it down, and it is sent back to the engine's cylinder. This cycle continues, and the engine is being cooled rapidly. Now coming to various types of sensors and components used in a vehicle's engine. So first coming to the module, which is the ECM or the ECU. It is also called as electronic control unit. It is basically the brain of the whole vehicle. It takes input from the whole vehicle through different types of sensors and then gives the output to the different parts of the vehicle, how to perform it and when to perform it. So coming on to this part, this is basically this wheel is basically connected to the camshaft, and this wheel is basically connected to the crankshaft. The camshaft gets power from the flywheel or the crankshaft using this belt. This belt is known as timing belt. Here is the sensor of camshaft positioning sensor, and this is the crankshaft positioning sensor. The camshaft positioning sensor basically takes data from this revolving teeth and then sends this data to the ECU. This wheel is connected to the camshaft, which contains different cam lobes which account in opening and closing of the different valves. Now coming to this sensor, this is the air temperature intake sensor, and this is the oxygen sensor. This is our air intake manifold. This contains basically three parts. First, the runner. The second is this cylindrical part, which is called as the plenum, and the third is the throttle body. The throttle body basically has a butterfly valve which accounts in this types of opening and closing. This switch is connected with the accelerator through a wire, and when we press the accelerator, this switch gets rotated and this opens the throttle valve. Through this throttle valve or throttle body, the air enters the plenum and it gets stored here, and then through the runners it gets to all the four cylinders. The runners basically deliver the air to all the cylinder valves. Here is the sensor of air intake. This is the air intake sensor. This sensor basically detects how much air is incoming in the air intake, in the intake manifold, and it sends the data to the ECU. This is the air pressure sensor, and it detects the air pressure inside this plenum. This is the oxygen sensor. This is used in the catalytic converter of the exhaust system, and it detects the air and the oxygen present in the exhaust air or exhaust gas. This is the this is the temperature sensor, and it detects the temperature of the air which is passing through the intake manifold. Now coming to the spark plugs and the main ignition part which ignites the air fuel mixture. These are the spark plugs, 4 spark plugs, and these are the ignition coils. this black part. The ignition coils basically are a step of transformer which increases the voltage of the current supplied to it to a very high voltage, which is enough to create such a spark which can ignite the air fuel mixture. Here is a setup of 4 cylinders, 4 cylinder piston assembly. This is the fuel rail. Coming to this real working engine, which is a SI engine or a petrol engine. This is a 4 cylinder, 4 inline cylinder, 1198 cc petrol engine of Maruti Swift. So now coming to the parts of it. This is the intake manifold through which air is being sucked in the engine. These are the runners. These runners lead to the valves of the engine, of the cylinders. This is the air intake sensor and this is the throttle body. This is the fuel rail through which the injectors are connected for proper spraying into the engine cylinders of fuel. This is the engine head cover and these are the ignition coils. These ignition coils are connected straight to the spark plug inside the cylinder. This is the alternator through which it is connected. This is connected through the flywheel of the engine and it produces electricity from mechanical energy and charges the battery. This is the cap for topping up the engine cover, engine oil. This indicator is used for checking up the quantity of engine oil inside the engine. This is the oil filter. This oil filter rotates the engine oil inside this crank case and cleans the engine oil. This is the oil pan in which the engine oil is basically collected. After the ignition of the air fuel mixture, these are the pipes through which exhaust gases leave the engine cylinders, and this is the catalytic converter through which these exhaust gases are purified and then released in the environment. This is the oxygen sensor and there are various sensors which detect the number of and amount of dangerous gases which are being exerted from this engine. This is the flywheel. The flywheel is the main heavy rotating disc which is connected to the crankshaft directly, and it is connected and powers various other parts in this engine. It also generates enough momentum to run other cycles of the engine piston. Now coming to the internal components of an engine, we have opened the head engine cover, which is kept here. These are the induction coils, as I told earlier, and this is the head gasket, which seals this engine. So now coming to the internal components, this is the camshaft and these are the cam lobes which account in opening and closing of the engine valves. We can see here that these springs that are directly connected to the engine valves. Inside these holes we can see the spark plugs which are ignited with the induction coils. These camshaft are connected directly to the flywheel or the crankshaft of the engine with this chain which is known as the timing chain. This is the sensor which I told earlier. and these are the teeth. This sensor detects the revolving teeth and sends data to the ECU, which sends further data to the fuel injectors when to spray the fuel. We can see some pipes here. This pipe, this pipe. This is basically the pipe of the coolant, which is being flown and which is circulated in the engine block. The coolant is basically a mixture of coolant and water, which cools down the engine, and it is circulated throughout the engine case. So this is the final working of an engine. So now coming to the lubrication system of an engine, it is basically the flow of the engine oil to all the parts of a engine system. Here we can see our engine. This is the camshaft. These are the valves. The rocker arms are connected from this cam lobes to these valves, which are currently not present. This is the oil filter, and a picture of the same engine is given here. Now let us see the working and flow of the engine oil in the whole engine. As you can see, this is the motor which accounts in the main flow of the engine oil. The motor sends engine oil from the oil pan to the oil filter, which gets filtered. After the filtration of engine oil, through this path, the engine oil is sent to the camshaft, the crankshaft, and the rocker arms for the proper smoothness and working of each and every part. So there is no friction and least friction and smooth working. This is basically the whole system, and after the lubrication, the engine oil returns back to the oil pan, and this process or this cycle continues.
Now coming to one of the most important department of the vehicle, the transmission department. It is also known as the power delivery system of a vehicle. Now what is the need of the transmission system? So consider a case where the power from the engine is directly transferred to the wheel. We won't be able to control the speed of the vehicle as per our need. So in order to avoid this problem, we are needing some edits in the vehicle power, so that we can adjust the speed and our torque according to our need. When the vehicle starts, it needs a high torque and low speed. And when the vehicle is in running condition and on the fifth gear, it needs a high speed and low torque. So transmission does the same for us. Now what is the layout of the transmission system? So from the engine, the power is delivered to the flywheel. From the flywheel, the power is delivered to the driver gears. From the driver gears, the power is delivered to the lay shaft gears. From the lay shaft gear, it is delivered to the driven gears. From the driven gear, it is transmitted to the differential. And from differential, it is transmitted to the final shaft of the CV joint. And from the final shaft, it is transmitted to finally the wheels, and the vehicle moves. So here is the engine, this is the clutch, which basically connects and disconnects the power while changing gears. Now this is the transmission box or the gearbox, this is the drive shaft, this is the differential, and this is the wheel. This is basically the cross section of a gearbox, and we'll see in a video that how the transmission system of a vehicle works. The power from the engine is delivered to the transmission box, which is then delivered to a shaft which delivers the power to the differential, and from the differential the power is delivered to the driven shaft, and from the driven shaft it is delivered to the wheel. This is basically a rear wheel drive car, and the engine is mounted at the front, hence a shaft is required to transmit the power from transmission box to the differential. Also this is the gear shifter. Now coming to the types of gears. This is spur gear, helical gear, herringbone gear, bevel gear, spiral meter gear, worm gear, hypoid gear, rack and pinion gear. So basically in our transmission system we use helical gears, as in case of spur gear at high speed sometimes the teeth skips each other, which causes wear and tear in the gears. Hence we use helical gears because the meshing is quite better than spur gear and it does not skips. The bevel gear is used inside the differential. The rack and pinion and the worm gear are used in case of the steering. Now, what is gear ratio? Gear ratio is basically the ratio of the number of teeth of driver gear to the number of teeth of driven gear. Gear ratio is used to determine the output from a power source that we need according to our need. So consider a power source which delivers a constant power. We need a high torque from it at a low rpm. So we will connect a gear to the power output and we'll connect a gear with more number of teeth than the driver gear, which is the driver gear is connected to the output of the power source and the driven gear is the power amount, the torque we need. So when the driver gear will rotate a driven gear, it will rotate it with a lower speed than it, but it will provide a high torque. So basically gear ratio is that ratio. It can be also it is also known as torque ratio or speed ratio. This is basically the 4x4 gearbox of a Maruti Gypsy. Now in this is the gear shifting handle from using which we shift the gears. This is basically input from the engine. This is connected to the flywheel. The engine gives the input here. This is in this is in neutral condition where no gear is meshed with the input. Now when we apply two-wheel drive, the engine is basically meshed, the output is delivered to only this gear is connected to the rear wheels of the vehicle. Now in this case the front wheel is not getting any power from this engine, only the rear wheels are getting the power from the engine. Now when we shift it to four-wheel drive, the engine from the power is transferred to the front wheel as well as the rear wheel. This is based on gear meshing. In transmission we use helical gears for better stability as they do not slip from each other during high speed. Now coming to the type of suspension system, we have manual transmission system, automatic transmission system, automated manual transmission system, continuously variable transmission system, direct shift gearbox, dual clutch transmission box and intelligent manual transmission. Now coming to the manual transmission, it is the most widely used suspension system in most of the vehicles we use in day-to-day life. This is basically the mechanism how we shift the gears, like how the meshing is done. This is the case of the first gear in which we need a high torque. This is the second gear. This is the case of the third gear. This is the fourth gear. As we can see, this is the output shaft, this is the lay shaft, and this is the input shaft. So the power is coming from this side, it is transmitted through the lay shaft and it is finally delivered to the output shaft. This is the clutch. The clutch this the clutch is used to connect and disconnect the transmission box from the engine while we change gear, as we cannot change the gears while the gears are in motion, as it will cause wear and tear, and ultimately the transmission system. This is basically a diaphragm clutch. Nowadays this is used in most of the passenger vehicles. So how does it works? This is basically the flywheel of the engine. The engine provides all the power output to the flywheel, and the flywheel transmits the power to the whole vehicle. So how does the clutch works? It acts as a medium between the transmission box and the flywheel, and connects and disconnects the power when we change the gears. So basically how does it work? So there are basically two friction plates associated with this diaphragm clutch. So whenever we in normal condition it moves together and it is connected through friction, but whenever we apply clutch, like we press the clutch, it segregates from each other. Now this is the input, the clutch, the friction plate which is connected to the flywheel side, and this is the friction plate associated with the transmission side. So this keep rotating and this stops, and when this stops we change the gear and ultimately gears are meshed. After that, when we complete with the gear changing, we stick them back and they start functioning together. This is basically the diaphragm which separates the friction plates. These are basically the two friction plates. These are basically friction plates which get in contact to move the vehicle. Now coming to automatic transmission system. The automatic transmission system doesn't require the driver to press the clutch pedal or shift the gear. It uses an integrated transaxle, torque converter, and a planetary gear set to automate the process of changing gears and pressing the clutch pedal. Now coming to automated manual transmission system. This system is somewhere between automatic and manual transmission system. In this system, the driver don't need to change the gears manually, but the gears are shifted in the pattern of manual transmission. Now how this process is attained? The gear is shifted using hydraulics and electronics based upon the readings of some sensors which reads the RPM of the vehicle, and the gears are shifted based upon the pre-programmed electronic control unit. Now coming to continuously variable transmission. This transmission is used in scooty and other fuel efficient vehicles. So how does this works? There is one driver shaft and one driven shaft, and the length of this belt is constant. So as the length of as the speed varies, the belt shifts from the driver gear towards the driven gear, ultimately increasing the velocity, and this process varies the gear ratio and increases the velocity of the vehicle efficiently. Now coming to direct shift gearbox. So how does this direct shift gearbox work? So basically this system requires two independent gearboxes along with two different clutch. So two independent gearboxes with two different clutch work together to attain this transmission system. This was developed by Volkswagen, and hence it is Volkswagen's proprietary. Now coming to intelligent manual transmission. In this transmission system, the clutch pedal is removed, but the driver requires to change the gears manually. So how the deficiency of clutch is covered? So basically the clutch is changed using a hydraulic clutch actuator, electronic transmission control unit, and intention sensor. So in this case, the driver need not to press the clutch, but he can change the gears on its own. Now coming to one of the most important part of the transmission system, the differential. So what is a differential? The differential acts as a medium between the wheel and the transmission box. So how does this works? This is the case of a straight road when the power is transmitted equally into the left and the right shaft. This is basically the differential, in which this is the drive shaft, which is the power is coming from the differential. This is a pinion gear which rotates the ring gear. The ring gear is connected to side gears. These are the side gears. The side gears ultimately transfers the power towards the left and the right wheels. So there is a one left side gear and one right side gear. After that, these are spider gears. These the gears which are not moving in this condition are known as spider gear. So in case of normal condition, the spider gears are not revolving, and instead of them, only the left and the right side gears are rotating. Side gears are moving and the spider gear are stationary. Now what happens when a car takes turns? In this case, the car is turning right. So what will happen? The left side gear will revolve at its speed, but the right side gear will slow down. And in order to compensate that, the spider gear will start moving. So instead of this gear, the spider gear start moves. So hence the velocity of right wheel slows down and left wheel increases, and hence the vehicle will take a right turn. This is basically a differential. The power delivered by the transmission box to the differential is splitted in equally into both the shafts of the differential. But in case of turns, consider turn towards right direction. So the 50% power that is supposed to be transmitted to the left will remain 50%, but the power that was supposed to be delivered to 50% power that was supposed to be delivered to the right side of the output will be consumed to rotate these spider gears. See, this is the case of a right turn. The left output shaft is rotating, the left output gear is rotating, the ring gear is rotating, the input shaft is rotating, every component of the differential is rotating except the right output gear. This is because the vehicle has to turn towards the right. So 50% of the power is used to transmit to move the left wheel, 10% of the power is transmitted to move the right wheel, and remaining 40% of the power is used to rotate these spider gears. So this is basically how a vehicle take turn. Now coming to components of the transmission system, the wheel don't move stationarily. It faces bumps, turns. Hence, we cannot connect differential directly to the hub, as it will break down in case of bumps and some turns. So we need an axle which can provide some movement to the wheel. So CV joint does the same for us. It is providing motion to the wheel, but and at the same time it is delivering the power also. So power is transmitted from the differential to the CV joint to the wheel hub. The wheel hub is holded by the upright. The upright remains stationary and the wheel hub rotates. The disc of the brake is mounted upon the wheel hub, and when we apply brakes, the disc stops the hub and the hub stops the wheel. This is the basically assembly of the wheel, CV joint, hub, disc, brake and suspension system. So how does they work together? When the power is coming from the differential, the CV joint rotates. In this case, the upright, which is not shown in this figure, it remains stationary. The upright connects the hub and the suspension system together. The wheel hub rotates, which in turn rotate the wheel
So now coming to one of the most important department of a vehicle, which are the brakes. Brakes provide the stopping ability to a vehicle. They are the stopping mechanism of a vehicle. They are very important and provide stability, and without them we cannot drive a vehicle. They also reduce number of accidents. Now coming to the principle on which brake works. So brakes usually works on Pascal's law. So what is Pascal law? Pascal law is a law which states that pressure applied to any liquid, any enclosed incompressible liquid at any point is transmitted throughout the liquid at each and every point on the walls of the container in which it is kept. So there are various types of braking mechanism or brakes. One of the first widely used mechanism is the drum brakes. They look like this and are present in various day-to-day life. So how do they work? They consist of a brake drum, a cylinder, two pistons, friction plates and some springs. So when we press the brake pedal, the fluid flows into the cylinder and it pushes the piston outwards, and then the piston pushes the brake shoes or the friction plates towards the inner side of the brake drum, and it creates friction, due to which a braking force on the tire is applied, and this is how the brake works. Now coming to another type of brakes, which are disc brakes. Disc brakes are widely used in nowadays vehicles, cars and bikes, because they have a very simple mechanism and they are very easy to maintain, as they are seen easily from outside. So how does a disc brake work, and what does they contain? Disc brake basically contains a rotating disc, calipers and brake lines. So how does it work? The rotating disc is basically mounted on the wheel hub, which is mounted on the upright with the help of a bearing. When the vehicle moves, the disc also moves around with it, and the caliper is mounted on the upright, which is stationary. When pressure is applied on the brake pedal, the master cylinder is pushed, which pressurizes the brake fluid, and the brake fluid travels and sends the pressure to the caliper. The caliper contains a small piston, and the piston is pressed due to that pressure, which presses the brake shoe. The brake shoe comes in contact with the rotating disc and friction is created. Due to this friction, a braking force is applied on the wheels, and this is how braking is applied in disc brakes. So now coming to another type of braking mechanism, which are mechanical brakes. So mechanical brakes basically contain a brake caliper holding two brake shoes along with a metallic brake line, which is covered and is connected to a brake lever or brake handle. When we press the brake handle, a tension is created in the brake line, which pulls the brake line and squeezes the caliper, which then pushes the brake shoes towards the rim of the cycle, or in this case towards the disc of the cycle. This is how braking is applied Mechanical brakes are basically used in cycles, bicycles, small vehicles which don't have a very high velocity or speed. So now coming to one of the most important and widely used type of brakes, which are hydraulic brakes. Hydraulic brakes basically work on Pascal's law, and they work with the help of a brake fluid which transfers the pressure from one point to another. So this setup consists of a master cylinder, brake lines, caliper, rotating disc, brake pedal and a push rod between them. When the brake pedal is pulled, the push rod pushes the master cylinder and the piston inside the master cylinder is pressed and the fluid is pressurized through the brake lines to the brake calipers. The brake calipers consist of small pistons which is pressed due to the pressure generated, and it further presses the brake pads which come in contact with the rotating disc, and friction is created, due to which a braking force is applied on the vehicle. So now coming to another type of brakes, which are electric brakes. Electric brakes basically consist of a disc, caliper, a controller, electric motor, wires and brake pedals. When we press the brake pedal, our electric current passes through the brake wire or electric wire, and it sends signals to the controller, and the controller activates the motor which pushes the brake pads towards the rotating disc, and braking is applied. This type of brakes are basically used in those type of vehicles where we cannot apply brake lines, such as trailers, caravans, etc. Now coming to one of the most important types of brakes, which are air brakes. Air brakes are used in locomotives and various other places where a large vehicle has to be stopped by applying little pressure. So how does air brakes works? Air brakes works same as drum brakes, only the difference is that instead of brake fluid, pressurized or compressed air is used, which is produced by the help of a compressor. Now coming to the brake pedal. Brake pedal is one of the most important part of the braking mechanism. It is a brake pedal which experiences the force which is exerted by the driver foot. The brake pedals transfer the force to the master cylinder, and then the braking mechanism is held further. So now coming to one of the main important component of a braking system, which are the brake fluid. They are very important part of a hydraulic brake system. They are certified by DOT, also known as Department of Transport. They are DOT 3, DOT 4, DOT 5 and DOT 5.1. DOT 3 and 4 are hygroscopic and they are compatible with each other. They are also glycol based, whereas DOT 5 is silicon based and is hydroscopic, which means it does not absorb water. Now coming to DOT 5.1, it is synthetic based and it is also hygroscopic, which means it absorbs water. So these are the basic brake fluids which are used in our day-to-day life in vehicles. Now coming to the braking system of a vehicle. This is a model of a braking system of a vehicle with the ABS unit inside it. Now coming to the components of the system. This is the brake pedal in which the driver applies the braking force. This is the brake booster. The working of the brake booster is very simple as it amplifies the force exerted by the driver on the brake pedal. It is connected to the master cylinder, which pressurizes the brake fluid to the calipers. Here is a cross section of a brake booster with a master cylinder. These here are the discs which are mounted on the hub. This is the upright and these are the calipers. Here is a cut section of a caliper with a piston inside it. These are the brake lines and these are the brake hoses through which brake fluid travel. This is the reservoir in which brake fluid is kept, and this is the ABS unit. Now coming to the working of the ABS unit. The ABS unit stands for anti-lock braking system, and the working of it is very simple. Consider a situation in which your vehicle is moving at a very high speed and you apply the brakes. Now in this situation, all the four wheels of your vehicle will be locked and you will be unable to steer your vehicle, and the momentum of your vehicle will guide you in the direction. So this is the place where ABS unit comes into play. The ABS basically gradually decreases the rotating speed of the wheels and slows the vehicle down without locking the wheels. This will help to reduce the braking distance as well as will allow the driver to steer the vehicle properly without skidding. This helps this is a safety mechanism which is now installed in various day-to-day cars.
Now coming to the control mechanism of the vehicle, the steering. The steering basically provides direction to a moving vehicle. Now coming to the basic principle and working of the steering. When you rotate the steering, the rotatory force is transmitted through joints and links in order to convert the rotatory motion into translational motion to steering rack, which ultimately directs the wheel and which ultimately directs the vehicle. Now coming to the working of universal joint and links, this is the basic mechanism how a universal joint works and how a rotational force is transmitted via steering to the pinion gear. This is basically a pinion gear which converts the rotational motion to translational motion. Now steering ratio. Basically what is steering ratio? The number of turn in angle you will have to rotate the steering wheel in order to rotate the wheel by 1 degree. So suppose in order to rotate your wheel by 1 degree, your steering needs to be rotated by 5 degree. Then the steering ratio of your vehicle is 5 degree. See, in this case 17.5 degree angle is the steering ratio for the vehicle, as 17.5 degree turn in the steering leads to 1 degree turn in the wheel. Now coming to parts of a steering mechanism, basically it's upright, it holds the wheel hub, it connects the chassis to the wheels. The upright holds the wheel hub and the wheel hub holds the wheel. The wheels are mounted on the hub and the hub is holded by this upright. The steering mechanism is connected to the hub via a steering knuckle. When you rotate the steering, the tie rod pushes the steering knuckle, which ultimately guides the wheels, as we can see in this video. Coming to the types of steering systems, so there are many kinds of steering systems, but majorly we use 5 types of steering systems in modern day vehicles. So the first one is worm wheel steering system, the second one is worm and roller steering system, the third is recirculating steering system, the fourth is rack and pinion steering system, and the fifth is double differential steering system. Now coming to the working principle of each and every steering system. So first is the worm wheel steering system. In this mechanism, basically the rotational motion from the steering is converted to translational motion using a worm gear and a worm shaft. So basically the steering column from which the rotational motion is coming is connected to the worm wheel, this wheel, using a pitman arm. So when you rotate the steering shaft, it rotates the pitman arm and ultimately it rotates the worm wheel. When worm wheel rotates, it converts the rotational motion to translational motion using a worm shaft. This ultimately guides the wheel, which ultimately guides the vehicle. This mechanism is generally used in tractors. Now coming to recirculating steering system, in this case the worm wheel is replaced by a sector gear and rest of the mechanism is same. Here a drop arm guides the shaft which rotates the wheel. As we can see, when you rotate the steering, it guides the drop arm. and the drop arm guides the drag link, which ultimately gives motion to single tire. The single tire is connected to the other tire using a relay rod. So all the wheels are synced using the relay rod, and the motion is given to the wheel using a drag link and drop arm. This is the mechanism of working of drop arm, and this is the mechanism how translational motion is transferred from drop arm to the wheels. Now coming to worm and roller steering mechanism. In case of this mechanism, the sector gear is replaced by a roller which converts the rotational motion into translational motion. Now this is the working of a worm and roller steering mechanism. See, the rotational motion from the steering shaft is converted to translational motion of the drop arm using a roller gear. Now, in the case of worm and worm gear, there was a worm gear steering mechanism. There was a worm gear which converts the rotational motion into translational motion. In case of recirculating, there was a sector gear, and in case of worm and roller, all the system is same. Just the sector gear is replaced by a roller, and the further mechanism is same. How the drop arm guides the drag link, which ultimately guides the this wheel, and the translational motion is transferred to the other wheel using a relay rod. Now coming to worm and roller steering mechanism. In case of this mechanism, the sector gear is replaced by a roller which converts the rotational motion into translational motion. Now this is the working of a worm and roller steering mechanism. See, the rotational motion from the steering shaft is converted to translational motion of the drop arm using a roller gear. Now, in the case of worm and worm gear, there was a worm gear steering mechanism. There was a worm gear which converts the rotational motion into translational motion. In case of recirculating, there was a sector gear, and in case of worm and roller, all the system is same. Just the sector gear is replaced by a roller, and the further mechanism is same. How the drop arm guides the drag link, which ultimately guides the this wheel, and the translational motion is transferred to the other wheel using a relay rod. Now coming to the most widely used steering mechanism, which is used in most of the passenger vehicles, the rack and pinion steering mechanism. Now coming to the working of rack and pinion steering system, the pinion gear rotates, which converts the rotational motion of the steering wheel to translational motion of the wheel using a steering rack. This is how a rack and pinion mechanism work. Now coming to double differential steering system. Double differential steering system is used in heavy vehicles like tanks. Consider if a tank wants to move right. When you rotate the steering towards right, it basically lowers the speed of the right wheel of the tank, which ultimately leads the tank to turn towards the right. This is how it works. Like it is in the normal condition when it is moving straight. Now the tank is supposed to turn right, towards right. Now the wheel has been stopped, which ultimately increases the velocity of this, and tank ultimately turns right. Now coming to steering assistance system. So what is steering assistance system? Steering assistance system is basically a system which reduces your steering effort and make the drive more comfortable. So there are basically three types of steering assisting systems known as hydraulic power steering, electric power steering, and electro-hydraulic power steering. In case of hydraulic power steering, a pump is used to flow a steering fluid inside the steering rack, which assists the movement of our steering, which ultimately reduces the steering effort. In case of electric power steering, an electronic motor is used to reduce the force we transmit to rotate the wheel. Basically, an electric motor assists our steering effort. In case of electro-hydraulic power steering system, both mechanisms are combined to reduce the steering effort. Hydraulic power steering is less efficient as the motor which runs the fluid is connected to the flywheel, and it rotates every time whether it is needed or not. So ultimately it decreases the efficiency of the overall vehicle. But in case of electric power steering, the motor is only started when we need it. So it is better than the hydraulic power steering. And electro-hydraulic power steering is somewhere between electric power steering and hydraulic power steering. We use electric power steering most widely in all the vehicles. This is the working mechanism of a hydraulic power steering. It was used in conventional cars. That is why there is no space for an airbag in the steering wheel. Instead of the airbag, we had a collapsible shaft associated with the steering column. So in case of accident, when the driver's chest used to collapse with the steering wheel, this shaft collapsed in order to avoid brutal injuries to the driver in case of accident. This is basically a rack and pinion mechanism powered by the hydraulics system, and the hydraulics in steering fluid is used as a hydraulic fluid. So in general condition, we need to put much force for steering the steering wheel, but once when we switch on the hydraulic system, the force required to steer the steering wheel has reduced significantly. Coming to electronic power steering system, nowadays this is the most advanced steering system used in vehicles. So this has the space for airbags, for infotainment system, and other things such as Bluetooth, call receiving, call cutting, etc. So this is also the same rack and pinion mechanism, but this is powered by an electronic motor which gets actuated by the direction of the steering wheels. So it only switches on when it is needed, when the driver rotates the steering wheel on the either side. So as we can see, the steering needs much efforts, but once we turn on the motor, then the steering effort has reduced significantly. Also, this steering wheel has adjustable steering, which was not found in the conventional steering system. Now coming to four-wheel steering. Four-wheel steering is basically when you rotate the steering, all four wheels are given direction using the steering system. In general, in normal passenger vehicles, we use two-wheel steering, in which only the front wheels are directed by the steering and rest two wheels are directed by the overall motion of the vehicle. But in case of four-wheel steering, all the four wheels are powered by the steering system, which result in case of slow speeds, like when you turn this wheel and this is straight, so what will happen, the turning radius will be more, but when you direct both the wheels, the overall steering radius will reduce significantly. And in case of fast speeds, what happened, the straight line stability of a vehicle is not very good, as the two wheels direct the vehicle and the vehicle directs the rest of the two wheels. But in case of four-wheel drive, in case of fast speed, all four wheels are assisted by the steering system, and hence the straight lines stability enhances significantly. Now coming to the steering geometry of a vehicle. So what is wheelbase? Wheelbase is basically the center between both the wheels when you see the vehicle from side view, and track width is basically the distance between both the tire center when you view the vehicle from front view. So basically, what is steering geometry? Steering geometry is basically governed by the angles at which your wheels turn when you rotate the steering. Like when you rotate the steering, both wheels do not turn at the same angle. There is some deflection in both the angles. The geometry on which a steering is based is known as Ackermann geometry. it basically tells us the turning radius of the vehicle and many other necessary details such as it. So basically here alpha I is the turning angle of left wheel and alpha O is the turning angle of the right wheel. Track T is the track width and L is the wheelbase. Using this we have derived this equation and ultimately we have lead to this equation which tells us the turning radius of the vehicle. This is basically the turning radius of vehicle at which the wheel rotates when you rotate the steering.
Now coming to one of the most important department of a vehicle, which is the suspension system. The suspension system is the main and the comfort mechanism of a vehicle. So what is the suspension system? It is basically a assembly of links, joints, springs and wheel, etc. And it provides the 3 C's for a safe drive, which are the comfort, control and contact. So coming to comfort, comfort is basically that the suspension system absorbs and provides a safe and smooth ride. It absorbs all the bumps, jerks on the road. The second is control. Control is the suspension system provides a better control to the driver of the vehicle in sharp turns, brakes. The third is contact. The suspension system ensures and maintains a good contact between the wheels of the vehicle and the road. The basic components of a suspension system are wheels and tire, springs, shock absorbers, linkages, joints, uprights. We will discuss each one of them further in detail. Wheels and tires. Wheels and tires are one of the most important part of a suspension system as they provide the main contact between the vehicle and the road. Here is a picture of an alloy wheel. This is a slick that are used in racing vehicles for a better contact and friction between the vehicle and the road. These are normal tires which are used in passenger cars. They have a grooving in them so they can hold and give a better contact in normal day-to-day roads. This yellow part is known as the contact patch. It is only the contacting part of a wheel when a wheel is rotating. Springs. Springs are very important part of a suspension system as they are only the shock absorbing part of a suspension. These are helical compression springs which are used in normal day-to-day cars. These are leaf springs which are used in vehicles having heavy weights. These are disc springs which are used at the end of helical springs in suspension setups. Shock absorbers. So shock absorbers are basically a combination of springs and dampers working together to form a suspension. Thus, the use of the damper is to ensure and absorb all the shock. It is filled with viscous liquids which absorbs all the bumps, and the use of the spring is used to bring the damper to its original position. They are also known as coilover damper. Linkages. Linkages are the parts which connect the wheel and the chassis together. Here is a picture of a linkage. It is also known as control arms. This linkage is particularly known as control arms. Joints. Joints are very important as they connect the linkages and chassis and all the parts together. This is a picture of fisheye which provides some degree of freedom so that the suspension system can work easily. The upright. Upright is the main part of the suspension system as it holds and it holds and supports the whole suspension setup. It is only the part to which all the linkages, suspension, coilover damper, etc. are connected, and it also holds a wheel hub with a bearing mounted on it. Types of suspension system. There are basically two types of suspension system: dependent suspension and independent suspension system. Dependent suspension system, they are those suspension system in which the movement of one wheel is affected by the movement of another wheel. Like in this case, we can see that one bump is detected in one wheel and the other wheel is also affected. Coming to independent suspension system, the movement of one wheel is not affected by the movement of another wheel, like we can see in this image. Now coming to some commonly used suspension types, they are solid axle leaf spring, solid axle coil spring, McPherson strut, and double wishbone. We will study about each one of them in detail. Solid axle leaf spring suspension. These type of suspension are basically used in heavyweight vehicles like buses, trucks. They have excellent load bearing capacity. They are made with a combination of leaf-like structure of metal. Solid axle coil spring suspension setup. They are a setup in which a suspension spring and a damper is placed and mounted vertically on a solid covering of the transmission shaft. They are used in various vehicles such as trucks, pickup trucks, etc. McPherson strut suspension system. They are the most widely used suspension setup in all day-to-day cars. They are very cheap and easy to maintain and mount. It is a combination of a suspension shocker which is mounted directly on the chassis and only one lower control arm is used. They are used in various vehicles like Swift, Ertiga, Creta, etc. which are used in and seen in day-to-day life. Double wishbone suspension setup. As the name suggests, double wishbone, two control arms are used and a shocker or shock absorber is connected to the lower control arm of the setup or upper control arm of the setup. They are used in high-end luxury cars as they provide better comfort as compared to McPherson strut. They are a little costly and hard to set up. They are also used in some racing cars as they provide much better stability and comfort. Now coming to some terms related to the suspension setup, they are camber, caster, tube, change in inclination and screw radius. We will study each one of them in detail. Camber. It is basically viewed from the vehicle's front view and it is the angle between the vertical axis and the tire center line. It is used for better tire contact of the vehicle with the road. You can see in this picture that a vehicle is having camber. Now coming to the types of camber, there are three types of camber: neutral camber, positive and negative. Neutral camber in which the angle is zero and it is used in all day-to-day cars and vehicles. Positive camber. In this picture we can see the tire is budged towards outside or tilted outside. It is used in lightweight vehicles or lightweight weight carrying vehicles in which load is carried. Negative camber. It is used in sports car for providing better contact patch with the road in cornering. Caster. It is basically seen from the vehicle's side view. It is the angle of the upright with the vertical axis. It helps in varying the steering effort and stability. The three types of caster are positive caster, neutral caster and negative caster. Positive caster are used in those vehicles in which steering effort has to be increased, which increases the overall stability of the car in high speed. Neutral caster are used when the steering effort and the stability has to be kept in neutral. And negative caster are used in shopping carts and various other vehicles in which the steering effort has to be reduced a lot and stability does not matter a lot. Now coming to toe angle. So what is toe angle? Toe angle is basically viewed from the vehicle top view. It is the angle between the center line and the center line between the vehicle tire center line and vertical axis of a car or a vehicle. It helps in increasing the steering response or decreasing the steering response. Types of toe. Toe out. Toe out is basically used in increasing यहाँ से कट मार देंगे. Now coming to types of toe. Toe out, neutral toe and toe in. Toe out is used in vehicles in which we have to overcome the problem of understeering. It basically reduces the turning radius of the car. Coming to neutral toe, it is used in vehicles which does not require any problems of understeering or oversteering. Toe in, it is used in vehicles to overcome the problem of oversteering. It increases the overall turning radius of the vehicle. Now coming to king wheel inclination, it is basically viewed from the vehicle front view and it is the angle between the tire's center line and the steering axis. It is basically used to reduce the steering effort, and the distance between the center of the contact patch with the steering axis is called the scrub radius. Now coming to the mock layout of a car electrical wiring system. This is basically an electrical wiring system of a Maruti Omni van. When we put the keys and give the ignition, the starter motor connected to the battery comes into play and the small pinion gear moves out of here and rotates the flywheel, which in turn starts the engine. This is an alternator which is connected directly to the flywheel and converts mechanical energy to electrical energy and then charges the battery. Here are some of the components, electrical components of a car. Like these are the headlights, these are the indicators, this is the horn, this is the speedometer which tells us the car's current speed, vehicle current speed. This tells the temperature of the engine, and this is the fuel level indicator. This is the interior light, these are the rear lights, rear tail lights, this is the reverse light, and this is the license plate light. These are the switches of the headlight and wipers, and this is the sensor which is placed inside the fuel tank, which tells us how much fuel is present inside the fuel tank. This is the fuse box which contains all the fuses kept inside which contains all the fuses. Now coming to the reverse camera and parking system of a vehicle. These are the 4 ultrasonic sensors which are placed at the rear bumper of a vehicle. This is the display output and this is the controller. Whenever any object comes near the vehicle during reverse, these 4 sensors detect the distance and then it tells to the controller, and the controller displays the distance in this display. It is generally mounted on the rear view mirror of the car. Now coming to the reverse camera setup of this vehicle. This is the rear view camera and this is the display, infotainment system or the display, in which the rear view of the vehicle is shown during reverse. Now coming to the working of an air conditioning system in a vehicle. This is a working model of an air conditioning system in a vehicle. Now coming to the parts of the system. This is the blower system kit, which is having a player of blower fans, a evaporator fitted inside this, a compressor, a condenser with a fan, liquid receiver and expansion valves. Now coming to the working of the system. When we switch on this system, the compressor is connected to the flywheel of the engine with a belt. The refrigerating liquid is basically flown in the system by the compressor, and the refrigerating fluid in this compressor is in gaseous state at around 90-degree temperature and 18 bar pressure. This compressor flows this fluid to this condenser, which cools the refrigerating fluid from 90 degrees Celsius to 45 degrees Celsius, and it reduces the pressure from 18 bar to around 16 to 17 bar. In this case, the state of the refrigerating fluid changes from gaseous to liquid state. This liquid refrigerant is now passed through this liquid receiver, and it is filtered, and the moisture inside it is absorbed. After the filtration of the refrigerant, the fluid passes through the expansion valve. The expansion valve is basically a nozzle through which the refrigerant flows, and the pressure of this refrigerant changes and drops rapidly from 16 to 17 bar to around 2 to 3 bar. During this process, the temperature also reduces rapidly from 45 degrees Celsius to around 10 degrees Celsius. This refrigerant, which is in gaseous state now, passes through this evaporator, and the blower fans flows the air through this evaporator coil and exchanges heat energy from this gaseous refrigerant and chills down. This chilled air is led to pass through these gills and cools down the vehicle cabin. After this process, some of the refrigerant is now converted to liquid state and is passed again through this expansion valve, in which the refrigerant is changed back to the gaseous state, and this refrigerant is again flown through this compressor. This process continues, and this is how basically our air AC works.
So now, as we have learned about the working of different types of systems, now let's see how they club together to run a full-fledged vehicle. So this is basically a cut section of a Maruti Suzuki Swift Desire, specially designed for demonstration purpose. So starting with the frame, it is having aluminium monocoque chassis. This is basically the fuel tank of the vehicle, in which fuel is stored and it is delivered to the engine through submersible pump. Now coming to the engine, the fuel is supplied to the engine and the movement of the piston generates power. The power is then delivered to the flywheel, and from the flywheel it is delivered to the transmission box through clutch plate. This is the clutch plate and this is the flywheel. Now the transmission box decides the velocity of the ring gear as we change the gear, as this is the lowest gear with the highest torque and lowest RPM, while this is the case of the highest gear with lowest torque and highest RPM. kindly note that the velocity of the flywheel remain constant in both the cases. Now from the flywheel, now from the ring gear, the power is transmitted to the differential, and from the differential the power is transmitted to the CV joint. This is basically the CV joint. From the CV joint, the power is transmitted to the hub, which is connected to the disc, and the wheel is mounted through these studs on the wheel hub. This disc is also connected to the hub, and this is basically the caliper of the disc brake mechanism. In the front part of the vehicle, we have used the disc brake mechanism, and in the rear part of the vehicle, we have used the drum brake mechanism. This is basically the system of drum brake mechanism. Now coming to the suspension system of the vehicle, in the front part we have used McPherson strut suspension system mechanism, and in the rear we have used torsion beam suspension system. So we have covered all the systems that clubs together to form a full-fledged vehicle.